The alien's violet blood spattered across Vincent's boots as the wounded extraterrestrial collapsed before him, an anguished plea gurgling from its throat. Vincent froze, finger twitching near the trigger of his sidearm, conflicted between his soldier's instinct and his conscience. He had only landed on this desolate hellscape of a planet to investigate a cryptic distress signal picked up by his aging freighter. Vincent was no hero, just an ex-grunt turned freelance cargo hauler, barely scraping by on the fringes of civilized space. He had no business getting tangled up in whatever this was. But here he stood, towering over a broken alien creature, its 4 trembling arms clasped around a seeping wound, huge black eyes pleading for salvation. The distress call crackled through Vincent's mind again. Critical damage, supplies low, request any assistance. He tried to tell himself it wasn't his problem, that he had a schedule to keep and a cargo hold full of goods to deliver. His years on the battlefield, however, had left him unable to abandon a soul in need, even a decidedly non-human one. Cursing under his breath, Vincent knelt down and unclipped the medkit from his belt. As he began assessing the alien's injuries, it spoke again in halting, heavily accented English. "Help, you're my only hope. They will find me. Force me to complete it, a weapon to unleash hell across the stars." Vincent looked up sharply from applying pressure to the oozing gash. "Who will find you? What weapon?" The alien shuddered. "I am Deneb of the Akamari. My government. They demanded I build them a device, one that would burn entire planets and enslave civilizations. When I refused, they branded me a traitor. I fled. But my ship was damaged. I sent the distress signal, and you came." Deneb convulsed in pain, violet blood trickling from his mouth. He grasped Vincent's arm with a surprisingly strong grip. "Please, you must stop them. They cannot possess this technology. Trillions will suffer." Vincent rocked back on his heels, his head spinning. He was no stranger to war or its terrible costs. He had seen cities reduced to rubble, bodies charred beyond recognition. The notion of a weapon that could inflict such horrors on a planetary scale chilled him to his core. Yet what could one burnt-out ex-soldier do against an alien regime hell-bent on galactic domination? Vincent was just a man, and a tired, jaded one at that. If he walked away, left this dying scientist to his fate, he could go back to his simple life hauling freight. No one would ever know. But as he looked into Deneb's desperate, pain-filled eyes, Vincent knew he had already made his choice. Maybe it was foolish, suicidal even, but if there was even a chance he could prevent the slaughter of countless innocents, how could he turn his back? Jaw clenched with resolve, Vincent reached down and heaved the injured alien over his shoulder. "Don't die on me yet, Doc. Looks like we've got a weapon to stop and a war to prevent, and I'm going to need your help to do it." As he carried Deneb towards his waiting ship, the weight of the galaxy settled heavily on Vincent's shoulders. He didn't know if 2 broken souls could save the universe, but he had to try. Vincent's soldierly instinct to aid those in need overrode his hesitation. He applied pressure to Deneb's wound with a bandage from his medkit, but the alien required more advanced medical care. Vincent slung Deneb's arm over his shoulder, bearing his weight as they limped up the freighter's ramp. Inside, he buckled Deneb into the co-pilot's seat, before dropping into the pilot's chair himself. Vincent's hands flew over the controls, firing up the engines. No sooner had they begun to hum than a trio of angular Akamarian starfighters screamed overhead, banking sharply to line up another pass. Vincent wrenched the throttle forward, but the freighter was slow to gain speed. The lead fighter strafed the lumbering vessel with laser fire, alarms blaring as the shots impacted the hull. Smoke billowed from one engine. "Shit!" Vincent swore, hands tightening on the yoke. He couldn't outrun them, not with a damaged engine. But maybe. He reached over and flipped a switch, diverting power to the ship's twin laser cannons. As the freighter laboriously clawed its way skyward, Vincent centered the targeting reticule over the nearest fighter and squeezed the trigger. Crimson bolts lanced out, stitching a line of destruction along the fighter's fuselage until it detonated in a plume of flame. The freighter shuddered as the remaining fighters opened fire, hammering its shields. Vincent sent the ship careening into a dizzying spiral, narrowly evading the worst of the barrage. In the rear of the cockpit, Deneb groaned in pain, violet blood oozing through the bandage. With trembling hands, the Akamarian scientist grasped the controls of the rear turret, unleashing an answering salvo. One shot found its mark, shearing off a fighter's wing and sending it pinwheeling into the dirt. As if in response, the final Akamarian ship abruptly broke off pursuit. With a flicker of pseudo-motion, it accelerated to FTL speeds and vanished, leaving only a fading ion trail. Vincent exhaled heavily, adrenaline still surging. In the sudden stillness, he swiveled his chair to face Deneb. "Looks like you've made some powerful enemies," Vincent said, eyeing the wounded alien. "What's so important about this weapon that they'd chase you all the way out here?" Deneb hesitated, pain and fear warring in his obsidian eyes. Then, haltingly, he spoke. "It is a virus, genetically engineered to target specific species' DNA. A doomsday device to keep those my government deems lesser races in line. With it, they could wipe out entire civilizations with a single vial." Vincent felt his blood run cold. In his years as a soldier, he'd seen more than his share of death, entire cities reduced to rubble and ash. But this was a whole new level of devastation, of cruelty. "I've seen my share of killing," Vincent said slowly, "but this is a whole new level of wrong." Deneb's ragged breathing filled the cockpit as Vincent set a course for Telos Station, the nearest spaceport. He figured he could drop the alien scientist off there, let him catch a transport to somewhere safe, and wash his hands of this whole mess. But as the stars streaked by outside the viewports, Deneb began to talk, his voice weak but urgent. He spoke of life under Akamarian rule, of the brutality and oppression his people endured. Dissent was met with swift and merciless retribution, imprisonment, torture, even public executions. The Akamarians demanded absolute obedience, crushing any whisper of rebellion. As Vincent listened, his jaw clenched tighter and tighter. Memories stirred, unbidden, of similar atrocities he'd witnessed during his time as a soldier. Villages razed, civilians caught in the crossfire, the innocent punished for the actions of a defiant few. His knuckles whitened on the controls. When they docked at Telos Station, Vincent had to half-carry Deneb through the bustling crowds. The scientist was fading, his wounds taking their toll. Vincent shouldered his way into a dingy bar tucked away in the station's underbelly, a place frequented by smugglers and mercenaries. In a shadowed corner, a group of Zeraxians lounged, their scaly hides glinting in the dim light. Vincent approached warily. The reptilian aliens had a reputation for taking on risky jobs for the right price. "I need transport for him." Vincent jerked his chin at Deneb, somewhere off the grid out of Akamarian reach. The Zeraxian leader leaned forward, his slitted eyes appraising. "It can be done," he hissed, "but it will cost you." The price he named made Vincent's gut clench. It would wipe out his meager savings, leave him dead broke. He hesitated, torn. Suddenly the bar door burst open, and a squad of Akamarian soldiers poured in, weapons drawn. "There he is!" one barked, jabbing a finger at Deneb. "Seize the traitor!" Patrons screamed and dove for cover as the soldiers opened fire. Laser bolts sizzled through the air, scorching holes in the walls. Vincent shoved Deneb down and upended a table, crouching behind it as shots pinged off the metal surface. Beside him, the Zeraxians drew their own blasters and returned fire. Vincent risked a glance around the table's edge and squeezed off a few shots, downing a soldier who'd ventured too close. In the chaos, a stray bolt clipped Deneb in the shoulder. He cried out, violet blood splattering. Vincent cursed, scrabbling at his belt for something, anything to turn the tide. His fingers closed around the cool metal of a grenade, pried from a fallen Akamarian. Praying it wasn't a dud, Vincent yanked the pin and lobbed it at the cluster of soldiers. The blast shook the bar, sending bodies and debris flying. In the momentary lull, Vincent hauled Deneb up and half-dragged him through the back door into the alley beyond. As they stumbled down the narrow passage, Vincent's mind raced. The Akamarians had found them too quickly. They'd never stop hunting Deneb, not while he held the key to their twisted weapon. There was only one choice, much as it galled him. Vincent gritted his teeth and pulled Deneb to a halt. "Change of plans," he growled. "You're staying with me. We're going to get that virus intel to someone who can stop this madness." Once safely aboard his battered freighter, Vincent hastily dragged Deneb to the ship's cramped medbay. With trembling hands, he tore open a sterile pack and began cleaning and dressing the alien's shoulder wound as best he could. Vincent's mind raced as he worked, desperately trying to formulate a plan. They needed help, but who could they trust? Then it hit him. Miko Tanaka, his old war buddy who now held a high rank in Earth Defense Force intelligence. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. Vincent punched in the secure comm frequency with blood-slicked fingers. When Miko's face flickered onto the screen, etched with confusion and concern, Vincent launched into his tale. But as he spoke, he could see the skepticism growing in Miko's eyes. In a last-ditch effort, Vincent transmitted Deneb's stolen research files on the virus. He watched as Miko's expression morphed from doubt to horror as he scanned the data. "Vincent, if this is true, you need to bring this Deneb and his intel to the EDF black site on Nix Minor immediately. I'll send you the coordinates. We have to get our top minds working on a countermeasure." Vincent sagged with relief as he plotted the new heading. But as he engaged the FTL drive, he noticed Deneb watching him, brow furrowed. "I don't understand," the alien said quietly. "Why are you risking so much to help me to stop this? You could have just left me on that moon." Vincent stared out at the swirling hyperspace vortex, jaw working. These kinds of conversations didn't come easy to him. "I've seen the kind of devastation weapons like this virus can cause," he said at last, voice rough. "Entire planets burned, populations wiped out, good soldiers forced to do unspeakable things, just following orders." He met Deneb's gaze, eyes haunted. "I didn't sign up to be a butcher. If I can help stop this virus from being used, maybe I can balance out some of the wrong I've done, start to make things right." Deneb opened his mouth to respond, but suddenly the ship lurched violently, alarms shrieking. Vincent swore as he scanned the sensors. They'd been yanked out of FTL by an Akamarian cruiser's tractor beam. "They've tracked us. We'll be in their docking bay in minutes." Vincent's mind raced, a plan taking shape. He pulled up the coordinates Miko had sent and shoved a data drive into Deneb's hand. "You need to get in an escape pod and jettison the virus intel. Get to these coordinates. My friend Miko will help you complete your research on a cure." "What about you?" Deneb demanded. "I'll lead them on a wild goose chase. Buy you as much time as I can." Deneb shook his head vehemently. "No, I won't leave you behind." Vincent grabbed the protesting alien and hauled him bodily to the escape pod, shoving him inside. "The mission is what matters now, not me." Vincent jabbed the launch button. "Deneb, go, it's the only way." As the pod blasted free of the freighter, Vincent felt a strange calm settle over him. He strode to the cargo bay just as the ship shuddered, the Akamarian's docking tube slamming home. The bay doors hissed open, disgorging a dozen black-clad Akamarian soldiers, rifles at the ready. They fanned out, moving to surround Vincent. Slowly, Vincent raised his hands, a grenade gripped in each fist, pins already pulled. He smiled grimly at the soldiers. "All right, you bastards, let's dance." The twin detonations from Vincent's grenades ripped through the Akamarian cruiser's hangar bay, sending soldiers and debris flying in all directions. Smoke billowed and alarms shrieked as the ship reeled from the unexpected blasts. Vincent wasted no time seizing the advantage, surging to his feet amid the chaos and confusion. He barreled through the disoriented Akamarian troops, a whirlwind of savage strikes and bone-crunching force. His years of combat experience guided his movements as he disarmed and disabled foes with ruthless efficiency. Blaster bolts sizzled past Vincent's head as he rolled behind a battered cargo container for cover. Vincent dove from his makeshift barricade, tackling the nearest soldier and relieving him of his rifle with a vicious twist. Armed once more, he laid down a barrage of covering fire, scattering the remaining Akamarians as he sprinted for the far side of the hangar where a line of fighters stood waiting. With a flying leap, Vincent clambered into the cockpit of the closest ship, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. The fighter thrummed to life, its engines flaring bright blue. Vincent wrenched the control yoke, sending the small craft hurtling out of the hangar and into the star-speckled void. He punched in the coordinates Miko had provided, praying to whatever gods might be listening, that Deneb had made it to the rendezvous safely. Vincent gritted his teeth as his stolen fighter shuddered and bucked around him, its abused frame barely holding together. Light years away, Deneb jolted awake as his escape pod shuddered and changed course. A sleek, angular ship loomed ahead, its matte black hull seeming to swallow the light. With a clang and a hiss, the pod mated with an airlock, and Deneb found himself face to face with a squad of grim-faced human soldiers. They escorted him through the bowels of the ship to a dimly lit conference room, where a tall, lean man with a shock of silver hair awaited. The man stepped forward, his dark eyes glinting. "Dr. Deneb, I presume? Captain Miko Tanaka, Earth Defense Force Intelligence? Thank you for your service and your bravery. Now let's see about putting a stop to this virus before it's too late." Hours later, an exhausted and battered Vincent stumbled into the EDF stealth ship's medbay, still trailing smoke and sparks. His gaze landed on Deneb, who lay on a bed attached to a tangle of monitors and tubes. The Akamarian's eyes widened as Vincent approached. "I just can't get rid of me that easily." Vincent cracked a weary grin, wincing as his split lip pulled. Deneb reached out, clasping Vincent's hand in his own trembling grip. "I never had a chance to thank you properly. You've risked everything to help a complete stranger. Why?" Vincent's smile faded, his gaze turning distant and haunted. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when good people stand by and do nothing. Never again." As the stealth ship hurtled through the void towards the distant EDF base, Vincent and Deneb exchanged a long, meaningful look. Their mission was far from over, and the spectre of the Akamarian virus loomed larger than ever. But for now, they could only place their faith in Miko and his team, and pray that they weren't too late to prevent galactic annihilation. As Vincent and Deneb stepped off the stealth ship's ramp onto the Black Site's landing pad, they were greeted by a stern-faced woman in an EDF admiral's uniform. Her piercing gaze swept over them, assessing and calculating. "Captain Vincent, Dr. Deneb, I'm Admiral Nora Sato," she said crisply, shaking their hands with a firm grip. "Thank you for your vital work in obtaining this intel. However, I'm afraid the situation has escalated." She led them briskly into the Black Site's fortified command center, where Miko and a team of grim-faced analysts were hunched over holographic displays. "Our latest reports indicate the Akamarians are already gearing up to mass-produce the virus," Sato said gravely, pulling up a star map. "They're planning to test it on Elysium, one of our most populous colony worlds." Vincent felt his blood run cold. Millions of innocent lives snuffed out in an instant, just to satisfy the Akamarians' twisted agenda. "We have to stop them," he growled, hands clenching into fists. "Agreed," Sato nodded sharply. "Dr. Deneb, our top xenobiologists are waiting to analyze your research. We need to find a way to neutralize this virus, and fast." As Deneb was whisked away to the Black Site's state-of-the-art labs, Vincent and Miko turned to the star map, poring over the latest intel. "There," Miko jabbed a finger at a pulsing red dot. "The Akamarians' primary bioweapons research facility. If we can take it out and capture their lead scientists, we might be able to stop this before it goes any further." Vincent studied the facility's schematics, his tactical mind already formulating a plan of attack. "We'll need a small elite team, in and out before they even know what hit them." Miko nodded, his jaw set. "I've got just the operators in mind. Rao, Takeshi, Ivanova, Shin, the best of the best. They'll follow your lead." As the hand-picked team assembled in the Black Site's armory, gearing up with cutting-edge weapons and stealth tech, Vincent felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Deneb, holding out a small, innocuous-looking device. "Take this," the Akamarian scientist said urgently. It's a prototype neutralizing agent we've developed. It won't stop the virus completely, but it should buy you some time if things go wrong. Vincent accepted the device with a grim nod, slipping it into his combat armor. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Moments later, the team was strapped into a sleek black stealth dropship, rocketing towards the Akamarian facility. Vincent checked his rifle for the 100th time, adrenaline already coursing through his veins. As the facility's perimeter came into view, he met the eyes of each operator in turn, seeing the same steely determination reflected back at him. They all knew what was at stake, the fate of millions, perhaps billions, hanging in the balance. Listen up, Vincent said quietly, his voice cutting through the dropship's thrumming engines. We're the only thing standing between the Akamarians and galaxy-wide genocide. Failure is not an option. With a silent hand signal, he ordered the team to move out. As one, they slipped from the dropship's belly, hitting the ground running towards the facility's looming walls, weapons at the ready. The fate of worlds rested on their shoulders, and they would not fail. As the team approached the heavily fortified perimeter of the Akamarian bioweapons facility, Vincent held up a closed fist, signaling for them to halt. He surveyed the towering walls, bristling with sensor arrays and gun emplacements. Rao Shin, find us a way in, he murmured into his calm. Quiet and quick, just like we drilled. The two operatives nodded, melting into the shadows with barely a whisper. Vincent counted his heartbeats, every muscle coiled and ready to spring into action. Path's clear, boss. Rao's voice crackled over the comm a tense minute later. North Wall, Section 12, sensors are down and we've got a breach point. Copy that, Vincent replied, motioning for the team to move out. They ghosted across the open ground, hugging the shadows, until they reached the section of wall Rao had indicated. Shin was waiting, her face smeared with camouflage paint, a shaped charge already affixed to the reinforced metal. Fire in the hole, she whispered, priming the detonator. The team ducked behind a low berm as a muffled thump shook the ground, leaving a jagged, smoking hole just large enough to slip through. Vincent was the first one through the breach, rifle sweeping left and right, searching for threats. But the corridor beyond was eerily deserted, the only sound the distant hum of machinery. Takeshi, get us a layout, Vincent ordered, never taking his finger off the trigger. The tech specialist pulled up a holographic schematic of the facility, overlaying it with the heat signatures of patrols and scientists. Main lab's 2 levels down, Takeshi reported, highlighting a pulsing red section. That's got to be where they're cooking up the virus. Vincent nodded sharply. Then that's our target. Non-lethal takedowns only. We need those scientists alive for interrogation. Let's move. The team slipped deeper into the facility, dispatching the occasional guard with ruthless efficiency. A chokehold here, a tranq dart there. They were the best of the best, and this was what they trained for. As they approached the main lab, Vincent's skin prickled with a sense of wrongness. It was too quiet, too easy. Where were the alarms, the waves of reinforcements? Just as the thought crossed his mind, a piercing klaxon shattered the stillness. Blast doors slammed down, cutting off their escape routes, and the crackle of charging weapons filled the air. Ambush! Ivanova yelled, diving for cover as a hail of blaster fire ripped through the corridor. Vincent cursed, realizing they'd been led into a trap. The Akamarians had known they were coming. Take cover and return fire, he barked, unleashing a volley of shots at the advancing black-clad figures. His team needed no further prompting, laying down a blistering barrage of suppressing fire. But the Akamarians kept coming, heedless of their losses, driven by fanatic devotion to their genocidal cause. For everyone that fell, 2 more seemed to take their place, pressing forward relentlessly. Vincent gritted his teeth, watching his ammo counter tick downward with alarming speed. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and rapidly running out of options. Then, just as all seemed lost, a tremendous explosion rocked the facility, sending friend and foe alike stumbling. Vincent risked a glance over his shoulder to see a gaping hole where the blast door had been, the edges still glowing molten orange. Vincent laughed, a fierce, exultant sound, as he rallied his battered team. "You heard the man. Let's move. We've got a galaxy to save." With renewed determination, they surged forward into the fray. Deneb's unexpected reinforcements evening the odds. The battle was brutal and bloody, but inch by hard-fought inch, they pushed towards the main lab, the key to stopping the Akamarians' apocalyptic plans. As they reached the lab's blast-shielded doors, Vincent paused, meeting the eyes of his team. They were battered and bleeding, but the fire of resolve still burned bright. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "it's been an honor serving with each and every one of you. Now let's finish this." Together they charged through the breach, weapons blazing, ready to face whatever horrors the Akamarians had unleashed. The fate of countless worlds hung in the balance, but they would not fail. They could not fail. Too much depended on it. In the heart of the Akamarian facility's main lab, Vincent and his team found themselves face to face with the true architects of the genocidal virus, a cadre of coldly calculating scientists, protected by a phalanx of elite guards. At the center of it all stood a tall, imperious figure in ornate battle armor, his pale eyes glittering with malice. "You're too late," he sneered, holding up a vial of swirling, oily black liquid. "The Eradicator virus is complete. Soon, we will unleash it upon your pathetic human worlds, and the galaxy will tremble before the might of the Akamarian Empire." Vincent's grip tightened on his rifle, his jaw clenched with suppressed fury. "Not on my watch," he growled. With a roar of defiance, he and his team unleashed a blistering hail of blaster fire, scything through the Akamarian guards. The scientists scattered like frightened rats, seeking cover behind overturned tables and humming banks of equipment. Vincent charged forward, vaulting over a console to tackle the lead scientist, sending both of them crashing to the floor in a tangle of limbs. They grappled for the virus vial, rolling and punching with desperate ferocity. All around them the battle raged, blaster bolts filling the air with the stench of ozone. Vincent's team fought with the courage of legends, but the Akamarians were fanatically dedicated to their dark cause. Just as Vincent managed to wrench the vial from the scientist's grasp, a searing pain exploded in his shoulder. He stumbled back, clutching at the smoking hole in his armor, as the Akamarian commander lowered his still glowing blaster pistol. "Foolish human," the commander spat, stalking forward. "You cannot hope to stand against the inevitable tide of our righteous conquest. Surrender the virus, and I may grant you a swift death." Vincent laughed, a rasping, defiant sound. "Sorry to disappoint," he said, holding up the vial, "but this abomination ends here." With a final burst of strength, he hurled the vial to the floor, shattering it in a spray of black liquid and shattered glass. The commander howled in rage, lunging forward, but it was too late. As the last of the Akamarian guards fell to the team's relentless onslaught, Deneb rushed to Vincent's side, his face tight with concern. "The neutralizing agent," he said urgently, pulling out the device he'd given Vincent earlier. "Quickly, before the virus spreads." Together, they slammed the device into the puddle of spilled virus. It pulsed with a blinding white light, and then, miraculously, the oily liquid began to evaporate, dissolving into harmless mist. Vincent sagged against a nearby console, exhaustion and relief warring on his face. "Is it over?" he asked hoarsely. As the rest of the team secured the remaining scientists and the battered facility, Vincent could only shake his head. "We did it," he corrected. "All of us, together. And maybe, just maybe, this is the start of a new era, one where humans and Akamarians can learn to live in peace." It was a fragile hope, Vincent knew, but as he looked around at the faces of his team, at Deneb's proud smile, he allowed himself to believe. They had stared into the abyss of galactic annihilation and emerged victorious. Anything was possible now. The long fight was far from over. There would be trials for the Akamarian leadership, worlds to rebuild, a delicate peace to negotiate. But for now, in this moment of hard-won triumph, Vincent let himself breathe. They had done the impossible, and he had never been more proud to call himself a human, a soldier, and a friend. The galaxy would never forget the day a small, determined band of heroes stood against the tide of darkness and said, "No more." And Vincent knew, with unshakable certainty, that he would do it all again in a heartbeat. For his team, for the countless innocents they'd saved, and for the chance at a better tomorrow. With a crackle of disruptor fire, Vincent's team breached the perimeter of the Akamarian bioweapons facility, engaging the startled Akamarian defenses with ruthless efficiency. Their cutting-edge EDF weapons sliced through the enemy's armor like it was tissue paper, felling scores of defenders within seconds. Vincent led from the front, his rifle spitting lethal energy bolts as he advanced inexorably towards the main research lab. His soldiers fanned out behind him, covering his flanks and cutting down any Akamarian foolish enough to pop out from cover. They blasted through the lab doors to find a cavernous chamber lined with rows of reinforced containment units, each one housing a sample of the deadly Eradicator virus. Wasting no time, the team set about planting demolition charges on the units and support pillars, working with practiced precision. Just as Vincent armed the final charge, a stray disruptor bolt struck one of the containment units, shattering its sealed front plate. An oily black mist began to vent from the breach, concentrated viral material. "Breach!" Vincent roared, reaching for the neutralizing agent Deneb had given him. He quickly sprayed down the team, praying it would protect them long enough to complete the mission. Alarms wailed as they pushed deeper into the facility, heading for the high-security data vault, housing the Akamarian research files. Vincent could hear the thunder of booted feet as Akamarian reinforcements rushed to intercept them. "Hold them off," he ordered his team, slapping a breaching charge on the vault door. The explosion tore it off its hinges, and Vincent dove inside, fingers flying over the mainframe's controls as he initiated the data download. Agonizing seconds ticked by as the progress bar inched across the screen, the sounds of battle raging outside. A cry of pain told Vincent one of his men had fallen, but he couldn't stop now. The download completed with a ping, and Vincent whirled, rifle raised, to find a mortally wounded Akamarian scientist lunging at him, a syringe clutched in his scaly hand. Vincent fired on instinct, but too late. The syringe plunged into his neck, its viral payload emptying into his bloodstream. Vincent stumbled, his vision blurring, the strength draining from his limbs as the virus rampaged through his system. With a titanic effort of will, he lurched back to his feet, rallying his battered team. "Fall back," he rasped, his voice already distorting. "Back to the dropship." They fought like men possessed, cutting a bloody swath through the Akamarian ranks as the bioweapons facility trembled and heaved around them, the demolition charges reducing it to rubble. Vincent's rifle clicked empty, and he hurled it like a javelin, impaling an Akamarian through the chest. At last they reached the dropship, piling aboard and securing the hatch. The small craft leapt skyward, outrunning the massive fireball as the facility exploded behind them, a plume of debris stretching into the upper atmosphere. Aboard the stealth ship, a grim-faced Deneb and his medical team rushed to meet the dropship, hazmat-suited figures helping the injured soldiers onto stretchers. Vincent tried to wave them off, but his knees buckled, and the deck rushed up to meet him. He awoke in a sealed quarantine chamber, an IV drip in his arm and sensor pads plastered across his sweat-soaked chest. His veins felt like they were filled with molten lead, every breath a harsh rasp in his lungs. Deneb appeared outside the observation window, his face drawn and haggard. He held up a data pad, his voice distorted through the containment suit's vocoder. "We're analyzing the research files you recovered. There's data here on the virus's structure, weaknesses. I think we can synthesize an effective treatment. Just hold on." Vincent shook his head, his words coming in painful gasps. "Not sure. I have that long, Doc. The virus, I can feel it. Burning me up." In a moment of feverish clarity, he forced his eyes open, fixing Deneb with a desperate stare. "If I don't make it," he rasped, "promise me you'll keep fighting. Don't let my mistakes would be in vain. End this madness." Deneb reached out, pressing his gloved hand against the quarantine chamber's viewport. "You're not going to die, my friend," he said, his voice low but fierce with conviction. "We're in this together until the end." As Vincent slipped back into the swirling delirium of fever dreams, he clung to those words like a lifeline. He had to survive. He had to. There was still so much left to do. The Akamarians were still out there, and as long as they possessed the virus, no one was safe. He would fight this, with every last scrap of strength and willpower he had left. He would fight and he would win. For his team, for Deneb, for the billions of innocent lives hanging in the balance. The virus raged through his blood, but Vincent raged back. He had a mission now, a purpose, and not even death itself could stand in his way. As Vincent hovered on the brink of death, his body racked by the ravages of the Akamarian virus, Deneb and the EDF medical team worked with desperate intensity to find a cure. They pored over the stolen research data, searching for any chink in the virus's genetic armor. Hours bled into days as they labored, fueled by stims and sheer force of will. Finally, a breakthrough. They identified a key vulnerability in the virus's replication mechanism. Synthesizing a targeted antiviral took additional precious hours, but at last they had it, a shimmering vial of liquid hope. They administered the cure to Vincent, watching his vital signs like hawks. For a tense 48 hours, he teetered on the razor's edge between life and death. Then, miraculously, his fever broke and his breathing eased. Vincent clawed his way back to consciousness, his body battered but his will unbroken. No sooner had Vincent regained his feet than Miko burst in with grim news. Akamarian forces were massing for a massive strike on human colonies, armed with the deadly virus. The EDF was preparing a counterstrike, but they needed time to manufacture more of the cure, time they didn't have. Vincent's jaw clenched as he absorbed the intel. He knew what he had to do. The Akamarians had to be delayed, their command structure disrupted, and to do that, he would have to take the fight to them. Deneb tried to argue when Vincent announced his intentions, the scientist gesturing to the IVs still snaking from Vincent's arms. "You're in no condition to fight. Let me come with you. I can help." Vincent started to refuse, not willing to risk his friend's life. But the steely glint in Deneb's eyes, the set of his jaw, gave him pause. He recognized the look of a man who would not be dissuaded from what he knew was right. Reluctantly, Vincent nodded. Together, they would finish this. They boarded a sleek EDF attack ship, Vincent familiarizing himself with the state-of-the-art weapon systems, as Deneb plotted a stealthy approach to the Akamarian flagship. The small ship sliced through the void, sensors straining for any sign of detection. Deneb's stolen command codes and knowledge of Akamarian security protocols got them past the flagship's perimeter defenses. They docked in a maintenance bay, dispatching the few technicians present with ruthless efficiency. Alarms began to blare as they fought their way deeper into the ship, Vincent's rifle spitting blue bolts of plasma. Akamarian soldiers swarmed to block their advance, but the human and Akamarian scientist would not be denied. Meter by blood-bought meter, they pressed towards the bridge. At last they breached the command center, the doors exploding inward in a hail of shrapnel. The Akamarian High Commander spun from the central tactical display, his eyes widening in shock and rage. "You're too late, human," he spat as Vincent trained his rifle on him. "The virus has already been unleashed. Your colonies will burn, and your people will beg for the mercy of extinction." Vincent's finger tightened on the trigger, his aim unwavering. "Not on my watch," he growled. Vincent's rifle leveled at the Akamarian High Commander's chest, his finger tight on the trigger. The two adversaries stood locked in a tense standoff, the weight of billions of lives hanging in the balance. "You're too late, human," the commander spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "The virus has already been unleashed. Your colonies will burn, and your people will beg for the mercy of extinction." Vincent's jaw tightened, his eyes hard as flint. "Not on my watch," he growled. With a snarl of rage, the commander lunged forward, his genetically enhanced muscles propelling him towards Vincent with blinding speed. The two warriors collided in a brutal clash of flesh and bone, trading blows with savage ferocity. The commander's superior strength and training quickly became apparent as he rained down a series of punishing strikes that sent Vincent reeling. Still weakened from his own battle with the virus, Vincent struggled to keep pace, his battered body screaming in protest with every movement. A vicious uppercut snapped Vincent's head back, stars exploding across his vision. He stumbled, blood pouring from a gash above his eye. The commander pressed his advantage, hammering Vincent with a relentless flurry of blows. Vincent's knees buckled, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The commander loomed over him, a triumphant sneer twisting his features. He raised his fist, poised to deliver the killing blow. Suddenly Deneb barreled into the commander from the side, knocking him off balance. The two grappled, Deneb's wiry frame belying his surprising strength. Vincent seized the momentary reprieve, forcing himself back to his feet. His hands scrabbled across the deck, searching for a weapon, any weapon. His fingers closed around the grip of a fallen blaster. The commander threw Deneb aside, the scientist's head cracking against a bulkhead with a sickening thud. He turned back to Vincent, murder in his eyes. Vincent brought the blaster up, his arm trembling with the effort. The commander charged, a roar of fury tearing from his throat. The shot caught the commander square in the chest, burning a fist-sized hole through his heart. He staggered, a look of shocked disbelief etched on his face. Then he toppled, a puppet with its strings cut. As the commander's lifeless body hit the deck, his hand spasmed, activating the dead man's switch clutched in his grasp. Alarms shrieked to life throughout the ship, emergency lights strobing crimson. Warning self-destruct sequence initiated, a calm automated voice announced over the cacophony. All personnel evacuate immediately. Vincent dragged himself over to Deneb, hauling the dazed scientist to his feet. Together they staggered through the disintegrating ship, dodging explosions and collapsing bulkheads. The hangar bay was a maelstrom of fire and flying debris as they stumbled aboard their waiting attack ship. Vincent's hands flew over the controls, coaxing the small craft to life. The engines roared, and they rocketed out of the bay, mere seconds before a massive fireball consumed it. The shockwave from the flagship's death throes slammed into their ship, sending it tumbling end over end. Vincent fought with the yoke, teeth gritted as he wrestled the craft back under control. As the flagship erupted in a blinding flash of light, reduced to a flaming debris field, Vincent sagged back in his seat, exhaustion and relief warring within him. It was over. They had done it. Across the war-torn expanse of the human colonies, EDF forces, now armed with the cure Deneb had helped create, pushed back the scattered and disorganized Akamarian forces. The tide had turned, the viral outbreak contained. In the aftermath, Vincent and Deneb were welcomed back to Earth as heroes, their names spoken with reverence and awe. They had saved countless lives, struck a blow against genocide itself. But even as the celebrations raged around them, Vincent couldn't shake the spectre of all he had seen and done. The cost of victory had been high, paid in blood and ash. He stood before the obsidian wall of the war memorial, his reflection fractured and haunted in its polished surface. So many names, each one a life cut short, a family shattered. Deneb's hand came to rest on his shoulder, a gesture of silent support. "It's over, my friend," the scientist said softly. "We won." Vincent's throat tightened, tears stinging at the corners of his eyes. "But at what cost?" he asked, his voice rough with grief. "How many more will have to die before this cycle of violence ends?" They stood together in silence, the weight of the galaxy's fate pressing down upon them. The war was over, but Vincent knew the scars it left would linger long after the last shot had been fired. As the scene fades, the narrator's voice echoes solemn and heavy with the weight of history. In the end, it was not the might of fleets or the power of weapons that saved the galaxy. It was the courage and sacrifice of a few brave souls, willing to stand against the darkness, no matter the cost. The road ahead would be long and arduous, the task of rebuilding daunting, but with the bond they had forged through the crucible of war, Vincent and Deneb would face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. The narrator clears his throat, his voice heavy with the weight of the tale he is about to impart. In the aftermath of the Akamarian defeat, Vincent and Deneb threw themselves into the monumental task of rebuilding the shattered human colonies. They worked tirelessly, distributing aid supplies, coordinating reconstruction efforts, and offering what comfort they could to the traumatized survivors. The scene shifts to a war-ravaged colony world, its once gleaming cities reduced to rubble and ash. Vincent, his face lined with exhaustion, hefts a crate of emergency rations from the back of a battered transport. He carries it to a makeshift shelter, where a group of haggard survivors huddle together, their eyes haunted by the horrors they've witnessed. As Vincent sets down the crate, a man emerges from the shadows, his face twisted with grief and anger. He approaches Vincent, his fists clenched at his sides. "You're the one they call a hero, aren't you?" the man spits, his voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "Where were you when my wife and children were dying in agony? Where was your precious EDF then?" Vincent recoils as if struck, the man's words cutting deep into his own sense of guilt and failure. He opens his mouth to respond, but no words come. What can he say in the face of such loss, such pain? The man turns away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Vincent watches him go, his heart heavy with the weight of the suffering he sees all around him. Despite their best efforts, the narrator continues, the scars left by the Akamarian virus ran deep. Many survivors, having lost everything they held dear, struggled to find a reason to go on. Tensions between the various alien races and the humans remained high, with calls for retribution against the Akamarians and their allies growing louder by the day. The scene changes to a crowded marketplace on a different colony world. Vincent and Deneb navigate through the throng, their eyes scanning the crowd for signs of trouble. Suddenly, a scuffle breaks out between a human trader and a Xeraxian merchant, accusations of price gouging and profiteering flying back and forth. Vincent and Deneb rush to intervene, pulling the two apart before blows can be exchanged. But even as they work to defuse the situation, they can feel the simmering resentment and mistrust that permeates the air. As the days dragged on, Vincent found himself increasingly disillusioned with the aftermath of the war. Despite his and Deneb's tireless efforts to promote peace and unity, old grudges and prejudices proved stubbornly resistant to change. Reports of hate crimes and sectarian violence became all too common, and the EDF found itself stretched thin trying to maintain order. We see Vincent and Deneb in a dimly lit room, poring over a stack of intelligence reports. Vincent rubs his eyes, the strain of long hours and endless crises etched into his face. "What if we were wrong?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if all we've done is sow the seeds for future conflict?" Deneb looks up from the report he's been studying, his own expression mirroring Vincent's weariness and self-doubt. "We can't let the sacrifices of those who fought and died be in vain," he says, his tone one of grim determination. "We have to keep trying, even if it seems hopeless." Just as it seems that the fragile peace might shatter completely, a new threat emerges. The scene cuts to a crowded street on a human colony world, just as a massive explosion rips through the air. Screams fill the air as civilians flee in panic, and EDF soldiers rush to secure the area. A splinter faction of Akamarian extremists, refusing to accept defeat, had launched a series of terrorist attacks on both human and alien worlds, the narrator explains, his voice heavy with sorrow. One such attack struck the very heart of the EDF, killing dozens of Vincent's comrades and leaving him badly wounded. We see Vincent lying in a hospital bed, his body wrapped in bandages, his face a mask of pain and grief. A medic leans over him, checking his vital signs, as a grim-faced EDF officer delivers a report. "Kurt Deneb, sir," the officer says, his tone somber. "He's gone missing. We believe the Akamarian terrorists may have taken him." Vincent's eyes snap open, a fire burning in their depths despite his injuries. With a grunt of pain, he struggles to sit up, ignoring the medic's protests. "I have to find him," Vincent says, his voice rough with determination. "I have to put an end to this once and for all." The narrator's voice fills the air once more, heavy with the weight of history. And so the cycle of violence continued, a serpent devouring its own tail. For in the end, it is not the evil without that threatens to destroy us, but the darkness within our own hearts. The scene fades on Vincent, his face set with grim resolve, as he limps towards an uncertain fate, ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. "And as long as we struggle against that darkness," the narrator intones, "as long as we strive to be better than we are, there is still hope. Not for a perfect future, but for a future worth fighting for." You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.